Funny how secrets travel on. I start to believe if I were to leave.
I'm going to do a little list today about 5 films that really make me feel like I'm in a dream or nightmare-scape. I think very few films have actually managed to do this, and I think the films I'm going to talk about are really quite special because of the atmosphere they work you into. Let's jump right into it. Number 1. Suspiria by Dario Argento. Suspiria is a very special film. I honestly think it's one of the greatest films ever made, and I think that is entirely due to the fact that it drops you into this fairy tale, dreamlike world where the story doesn't really matter. What really matters is the feelings that you get while you're watching this film as you're dragged along in this weird, colour-fueled adventure. It's really quite a fascinating film, and it's something I think that the sequel Inferno takes to another level to an extent that it kind of drops you out of the dreamlike scape. Every decision in Suspiria, from the colour choices, the shot composition, the soundtrack, even to the fact that every single thing in the film is overdubbed after shooting, no on-set audio, really helps produce this otherworldly experience that I don't get with many other films. Number 2. Deathbed, The Bed That Eats by George Barry. This is a film I know very little about. All I know is that a man called George Barry directed, wrote, and produced it. And honestly, that's all I need to know and want to know. I don't want to do any more research on this film, because with very few other films have I been able to walk in and just look at a film and be mesmerized by it. Again, much like Suspiria, the plot of Deathbed, The Bed That Eats isn't really very important. An evil bed eats people, except for one person that he cursed to live in a painting. And that's it, and the person stuck in the painting has a psychological link to the people that the bed is trying to kill. And he uses that psychological link to try and kill the bed. That's the film. It doesn't sound like anything special, but when you watch it, you're just transfixed into this weird world of evil beds and psychedelic imagery, and it's fascinating to watch. And because of that, because of this feeling that I get when I watch it, that it's a comforting feeling even though I'm watching people getting eaten by an evil bed. I just don't want to know anything about it. I want it to be kept special for me. Number 3. Jan Svankmajer's Alice in Wonderland. I love Disney's 1950s version of Alice in Wonderland. I was originally going to put that on this list because it does transport me into a nice, comforting dreamscape of the magical world. But I think this one is much more important to talk about, mostly because it's not so much a film that is talked about. It's definitely not to as large of an extent as Disney's Alice in Wonderland has been talked about. This version of Alice in Wonderland takes the same story, but shifts it into the perspective of Svankmajer, who was an artist who was often censored and oppressed by the Czech Communist Party's censorship laws. And so he takes the story of Alice in Wonderland and uses it as an expression of fighting against authoritarian control. I do think it comes out in this film, because you get this feeling of rebelliousness and wanting to break free, and screaming to break free. What really gives this film its dreamlike atmosphere is the fact that it's all done in stop motion, and very rough stop motion. And it's not through claymation, it's literal stop motion with actual physical objects being moved around, interacting with a little girl in it. It reminds me of a lot of nightmares and dreams I had as a child, where I myself would be interacting with the toys in my room as they would be moving around, interacting with me. And I think that's quite a relatable dream to have. So this film takes that to another worldly level, making you feel uncomfortable by all these toys interacting with the eponymous Alice. Number 4. Star Trek The Motion Picture by Robert Wise. I was originally going to put Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, but then I remembered Star Trek The Motion Picture. I'm a massive Star Trek fan. I love the original series, I absolutely adore The Next Generation. I also love most of the films. I love Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock. But I feel many people often forget the original Star Trek film, Star Trek The Motion Picture, because it's so weird. And the reason that I compared this to 2001 A Space Odyssey is because I think this film is quite well known as the 2001 ripoff, or at least heavily inspired by 2001. What makes me think of this more as a dreamscape and get more drawn into it is that I know these characters. I'm familiar with James T. Kirk, I'm familiar with Spock, I'm familiar with the universe that this is set in. So when weird things happen, being transported into a different dimension, I feel with these characters, I feel like my world has been turned upside down. But it's not just that. In its attempt to copy 2001: A Space Odyssey, Robert Wise takes it to a different level. We get absurd shots like in the beginning where we're tracking the Starship Enterprise for a good solid 2 to 3 minutes of just nothing else happening other than soundtrack. And while usually this kind of ripoff would be a detriment, and it is for the most part to the overall quality of the film, I can't help but be drawn into this film and sort of, again, taken to that special place that I don't get with many other films, that I don't even get with 2001: A Space Odyssey anymore. But I still get that raw, magical feeling with this film. Number 5. Exte, Hair Extensions, by one of my favourite directors of all time, Sion Sono. I already love Sion Sono's work. Sion Sono has a very magical style, a very distinct and, I would honestly say, kind of dreamlike style. You get it very much in Suicide Club, where you think it's one film and then sort of takes a wild turn into another, very much like a dream. You get it with his other films, maybe to a much lesser extent than in Suicide Club and in the film that I'm talking about, Exte. Again, Exte is very much a film where the plot doesn't really matter. It's more about this atmosphere. It's about killer hair extensions. So a woman was murdered and stuffed with hair, then this hair gets loose into the real world and is possessed by her evil, angry spirit. A girl finds this hair, uses it as hair extensions, it starts attacking her and making her life horrible. And the film just escalates from there, and it doesn't stop. The raw brutalization of the main character is quite horrific. However, the absurdity of the situation that's going on really reminds me of nightmares that I've had where I've been a victim of something so mundane, but it just never stops until it escalates to a freakish new level. And that's a theme that has been going on with all the films that I've talked about. The plots don't really matter. What does matter is the feelings that I get from it, which is this calm feeling, even though horrible things are happening in the majority of these films. Calm feeling that I get where I'm drawn into these films and mesmerized by them. It's like they want me to pay attention to them and be part of them. And because of that, they're part of me. I think it's really important to be drawn into a film and to just feel magical about it. I don't get that with films very often anymore. And I think these 5 films that I've talked about, and so many more that I could talk about, I put on and I just get a feeling of wonder. Hey, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this top 5 dreamlike films. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.